Okay, welcome. Today I wanted to honour Joy Schaverien, who passed away last week, and I wanted to talk a little bit about her work, some of her key teachings, and some of her kindness, compassion, and the different times that I met with her, and just wanted to really celebrate her life. So I received a message on Friday last week to say that Joy had passed on the Thursday, and essentially we were meant to she was meant to come on the 1st of March to the Boarding on Insanity premiere, and she was part of the Q&A, and I received a message on Saturday morning just as I was leaving, just to say that she was very unwell, she couldn't come. She was then going to come on one of the webinar series, which was I think it was the 6th of March again, and she had to cancel. So she basically had a stroke, and then that was in March, and then she passed away, like I said, last Thursday. And today I just wanted to talk a little bit about just maybe some of her timeline, and some of the books she published. I've got a few of them here, and some of the teachings. So essentially it was around 1990 that Joy first started to work with and started to piece together the impact of boarding school. She had quite a few clients who had been to boarding school, and there seemed to be this common theme, what she called a cluster. And eventually she wrote this book here, The Dying Patient in Psychotherapy, which was about this patient who was dying, who had been to boarding school. And so she started to explore that. She then went on in 2004, which is a paper she wrote. I'll see if I can find it. It's this one here, Boarding School, the Trauma of the Privileged Child, and that was in the Journal of Analytical Psychology in 2004. And that was the first time I really heard about Joy. And I remember hearing either a radio article or listening, hearing radio article, or reading someone saying that boarding school was like child abuse. And it stuck in my mind. I was like, oh. I'd read Nick's work at that point. I'd explored my own boarding school experiences quite a lot at that time. And it just, And interestingly, I only really got that it was Joy in the last few days, because in that paper, and I'll read the line because I think it's just so powerful. She just says, a Dutch colleague who had been a hidden child in the Netherlands during the Second World War worked with child survivors of the Japanese prison camps. Those experiences led her to the observation that the British establishment was a group of traumatized people as a result of the practice of sending young children away from home to be placed in the care of strangers. She was amazed that this was not because of some dire political situation, but for the purposes of education. This, alongside the experiences of my patients, led me to consider the British boarding school system to be a particularly British form of child abuse. And I just found that really, really powerful when I read that and heard that. So, wow. So, she published another journal article, 2011, about boarding schools. And then her seminal book, Boarding School Syndrome, came out in 2015. I think she wrote it originally, possibly 2014. No, it's 2015 in here. So, and, I kind of connected. I had heard someone talk about boarding school syndrome, and I was doing videos on YouTube, and I remember the first video I recorded in 2015 about my boarding school experiences. It was partly from reading a review of this book, and people were starting to talk about it. And what I found with Joy is that because she didn't go to boarding school herself, so many people, psychotherapists, Jungian analysts, who not been to boarding school has always presumed that our boarding school was good for you. A lot of people, it's only really through Nick's work and, you know, the boarding school survivor support and all these people that it started to be seen as a thing. And this was particularly Joy's, you know, her and Nick from the 1990s bringing awareness to the impact of boarding school. Really see that if Nick's the godfather figure, it was the Joy was the godmother figure of boarding school syndrome. And yeah, I think I went to one of the conferences 2019 and Joy was there. I didn't say hello, but I kind of saw her. She was there. And then in 2021, I reached out to her and asked her if she would be interviewed. And yeah, she was ever so kind. And I remember before we began, I was very nervous. I saw her as a star. It was one of my boarding school things, put people on pedestals and go, I'm terrified. And I said this to her and she says, yeah, I don't particularly like interviews. I get quite scared as well. So that was a really nice connection. And after the interview, she said, oh, would you, have you read this book? And I said, no. And she says, it's just come out a new edition. And so she sent through, bless you, a copy to me and put a little inscription in the beginning. So so I think we kind of met through that, and it was a really good interview, really enjoyed that. And then we met again 2023 when the film, we asked to interview her for the documentary, and we went to her house and interviewed her. And again, such kindness. And I think, I think that for me was something very special about Joy, is that most people didn't believe us who didn't go to boarding school of what it was actually like. It was, it's fine, parents or teachers, it was, it's fine. And to have someone like Joy, her stature, to go, yeah, I'm totally behind you. It just felt really heartwarming. Same Suzanne Zedike, similar. She didn't go to boarding school, but she has seen what we've been through, and she's like, such a strong supporter. And that's what I felt with Joy. It was like just that kindness and that goodness, that compassion for us. I'm trying to think what else. So maybe just kind of going in briefly into some of her teachings. And I'll put into the description the interview I did with her in 2021. But she talks about these 4 key areas, the ABCD of boarding school syndrome. So the abandonment, the bereavement, the captivity, and the D is the dissociation. And the dissociation is the essence of boarding school syndrome. Some people have said, oh, there's homesickness. She would say, no, that's bereavement. The institutional life of boarding school, that's captivity. And being left alone is abandonment. You've been left in one of these schools, and that's a core wound. I was speaking to someone yesterday about this and saying that that's what they've carried a lot of their life, that abandonment. So that was one of the key things. And the other thing I found in boarding school syndrome is she talks about this idea of being looked after children. People who go into care are looked after children. She says, well, people who go to boarding school are looked after children. They are essentially in care. And I think that's a really powerful thing to think of. When you send your child to boarding school, you're sending your child to be put into care. And that was something, I think it's page 6 from her book, Boarding School Syndrome. It's like, oh, wow. That's, again, a bit like the bit she says about child abuse. That for me, again, the looked after children, is like, wow, that's very, very powerful. So I think that's kind of everything I wanted to say. Really bless her, honor her, and I really recommend reading both of these books. I haven't read that one yet, but as you can tell, I have read this one, and this is fantastic. I mean, it's a hard read. It's more of a one you study, and it's quite emotional, but I just think some of her papers as well. You can find those online, you know, just to go through. It's just so fascinating. So yeah, really blessing her. Thank you so much, Joy, for all that you've given this community and your amazing work. And yeah, thank you. And thank you to everyone who's listening. And yeah, maybe if you've met her or she inspired you in some ways, please do comment below, because maybe, you know, people who see that will be inspired. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. Take care.